if I was sure that you were right about that, then that would be determinative for me. The only difference between you and me on that is that I'm not positive. So the counter argument that great progressives make to me behind the scenes, okay, is Elizabeth Warren knows how to get things done and has gotten them done. She has a different theory of change, but it's an incredibly effective one. So she got the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau passed when she wasn't even a senator, when the Republicans hated it and the Obama administration didn't want it either. I literally don't know how she pulled off that miracle, but that's pretty solid evidence that her strategic thinking actually does lead to wins on the board, and very large ones. So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, my only response to that would be, it goes right back to the Joe Manchin point. You have to, in order to win these battles, we have to know who we're battling. It's obvious that we're battling the establishment Republicans because we're always battling the establishment Republicans. But the open secret in Washington, D.C. that you know very well and I know very well is that you're also gonna have to fight half the Democratic Party.
100%.
You're the one who interviewed Tim Ryan, and you asked Tim Ryan, oh, if Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren is president and we try to get Medicare for all, would you be in favor of it? And he said no. And then you told everybody, and you're right, by the way, hey, Tim, you signed up for the bill. You put your name down for the bill. So we have to take on at least half the Democratic Party, and I'm a big believer in they're not gonna do it unless you force them to do it, and in order to force them to do it, you need to harness the will of the people. Now, what you said about Elizabeth Warren, even if I grant you that it's true, the way that she tries to go about—
Well, it's definitely true.
Well, to get the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, it's true, but how are you gonna convince half the Democratic Party or more by only using positive means behind the scenes?
But no. So those progressives also say what you guys don't see, and that's why I continue to have an open mind, is that she doesn't just use positive means, that she uses public pressure, and so that if she only used positive means with Obama and Geithner and Summers, there's no way we would have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
But it's not.
So
it's not
no,
positive.
she put a lot of pressure on them.
That's fair, but it's not positive when she says, "Allow me to make a spirited defense of Joe Manchin." That means I'm not going to go to West Virginia and do a rally against him. That means I will try to close the door and work behind closed doors in order to get him to do the right thing. But I don't think that'll work. I don't think that'll work.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Kyle. I don't think that'll work. If that's still her position, that it would be deeply problematic and perhaps dispositive. Now, that was a while back, right? That was what, 3 years ago or so that she said that, and you can say 3 years ain't that much, and Bernie's been consistent, and those are all good points, right? But on the other hand, folks that have worked with her behind the scenes say that she does a great job of pressuring Democrats. Here, I'll give you another instance where she was perfectly willing to defy the Democratic Party. All the banking hearings. Now you might say, hey, look, that's her bailiwick, and I know she's great on banking, and you obviously acknowledge that, right? But the part you don't see, and that I have heard behind the scenes, is the rest of the Democratic senators, when she first went off on the bankers, were furious at her, and she knew that they would be furious at her, and they tried to apply a world of pressure afterwards. You have got to lay off of those guys, otherwise how are we gonna win elections? She said, that's like your opinion, man, and I'm not gonna listen to you, and she went back in and kicked their ass again and again and again.
So even if I grant you all that,
which is true.
Well, then we get to the point that I just simply don't agree with her priorities as much as I agree with Bernie's priorities. I know you and Anna had a debate on the show a week or so ago where you were getting into the issue of Medicare for all, and does she really believe it, and will she fight for it, and all that stuff. And the bottom line is, when you look at Bernie's record and you look at her record, even if I say, okay, maybe she believes in it now, and that is a maybe, there are contradictory statements like crazy. Whereas with Bernie, there's none. It's the same thing for decades. So that's a big thing to me because that's on the top of my list, Cenk.
No, that's an easy one, Kyle, because she's gonna release her plan imminently. And when she does, you and I will look at it. We'll know for sure if it's Medicare for all.
That's true, but again, if it was something that you really deeply believed in and it's on the top of your priorities list and you're gonna fight for it, I don't think we would have had to wait until this point in the election.
Oh, I'll do a counter argument on that. Okay, Bernie on money and politics, #1 issue, okay? And it took till what? like 9-10 months into the campaign for him to release his plan.
Okay, that's a fair point. So your number one issue, you would say, is money in politics, and
well, I think you're probably going to agree with me that that's not my number one issue. It is logically the number one issue for progressives and for the whole country.
Certainly one of the top ones. I'll grant you that for sure.
Because we can't pass Medicare for all. I mean, Kyle, how are we going to get all those half the Democratic Party, and by the way, I think it's more than half, that are going to sell us out on Medicare for all, that are going to sell us out on Green New Deal? I agree with you. We're not going to do it with pretty please. We're going to do it with pressure internally and externally. But if we don't take the money away, they're going to vote against us for eternity on every priority.
Yes and no. The no part is you could also get it done with a general strike. And that's kind of what Bernie's calling for when he says, I need you to get in the streets when I get elected. And I think the likelihood of Bernie Sanders doing an address from his Oval Office, looking in the camera and saying, I need all of the American people to march on Washington today because we're going to do the new civil rights movement, and what we're going to fight for is the new economic Bill of Rights, Medicare for all, free college, living wage. We're going to end the wars. We're going to do a Green New Deal. We're going to get money out of politics. I think the likelihood that Bernie will look in the camera and deliver that from the Oval Office is over 85%, and I think the chances of Elizabeth Warren doing it is probably about 5%.
So look, people in the streets, I love it, but it actually somewhat misunderstands the politics, because you could have 1 billion people in Joe Manchin's street and he's not going to give a damn. All he cares about is the money. Okay.
So that's why you need the president to support a primary to his left, as Bernie said he would.
I totally agree with that.
Of course.
But on the other hand, Kyle, it took Bernie, what, I think the first time he said it was an interview with me in LA a couple of months ago. It took him all this time. He's fantastic on every issue, right? But it took him all this time to finally say things like, I will take on other Democrats. Until then, have you ever heard Bernie say an unkind word about Chuck Schumer? I've never heard it.
Well, I mean, again, I think I've heard Bernie be tougher on Democrats than I've heard Elizabeth Warren be tougher on Democrats.
But you will concede that has only happened really in the last couple of months. In the last election, when Bernie was asked in a debate, do you think that Hillary Clinton changed any of her votes because of the money she got? And he said no. That's crazy. Of course she did. And he's too polite. Yeah, and Bernie's gotten much better in the last couple of months, to be fair to Bernie. Okay, and so last thing, at least do you acknowledge that Elizabeth Warren is a real progressive? You might have a different theory of change than she does, and you might have issues with some of her foreign policy, et cetera, but it would be wildly unfair to say that she's not a real progressive.
So yes and no. I mean, yes, she is on the issues where she is, Wall Street, trade, tax policy. And obviously, if it came to a general election, I would have zero problem voting for Elizabeth Warren and arguing for Elizabeth Warren. But she's not as progressive as Bernie Sanders. And I think there are areas where genuine progressives would say, hey man, she's totally out to lunch on this issue. She's totally out to lunch on that issue, whether it's Israel-Palestine.
But that doesn't mean she's not a progressive.
That's fair, but I would just caution, not just for you, but for everybody engaged in this stuff. I'm tired of the discussions and the debates about labels. Like, I've heard it 1,000 times. We're not Dave Rubin, where we should go on camera every day and be like, I'm a classical liberal. I don't give a shit what you think you are. Who cares? Tell me what you're actually for. Give me your policy positions and we'll talk about that and flesh that out. So yes, you have a point. I would just say everybody should kind of avoid the discussion about labels because it doesn't help us. And also, an interesting little fact that you're probably the only other person in the country who knows this. In 2016, Bernie Sanders actually won in the primary among self-described conservative Democrats. How is that possible? Well, the answer is very simple. People don't know about labels. They could be conservative Democrats, maybe they're not, and they just think they are. But either way, they hear that guy talk and they go, I like that guy. So let's not get wrapped up in labels is my point.
Yes, unsurprisingly, we end on a complete agreement. Literally earlier in the show today on the Young Turks, I said these labels don't mean a goddamn thing. Okay, there you go, all right.